Hey everyone, my name is Brian. I'm a new owner of a Tesla solar roof, and in this video, I'm going to share 10 things that I wish I had known prior to installation. If you find this video useful, I'm going to include a referral code below that you can use to save $500 off of your Tesla solar purchase. Let's get into it. First things first, let's talk about your Tesla account representative. So the way this works is after you decide to purchase your Tesla solar roof, you will create a Tesla account and be assigned a designated account representative. Now, the intent is that all communications related to your project leading up to installation are supposed to flow through this person. And for me, the process started well enough. I think it was the very next day after making my purchase and putting down my small deposit, my Tesla account rep called me up on the phone. They introduced themselves and walked me through what I could expect in this process. So far, so good. Unfortunately, after that, the communication with the rep was very slow, very inefficient, and overall pretty painful. So the first problem I had was that my Tesla rep never once picked up the phone when I called. So for me, this installation process started in August. It's now the end of December, and my roof is now installed. I'm just waiting for permission to turn on PTO. And in that time, I attempted to call probably a dozen or so times, and never once did my rep pick up the phone. And I used to joke with my wife, like, "Hey, I tried to call Tesla about that thing. I called 2 or 3 times, and nobody picked up. Just and not even him, just nobody." So it's very frustrating, and that meant all my communication tended to flow through email. So, but even there, I learned to never expect a response on my first email. Almost always, I would send an email, have to wait 3, 4, 5 days, typically about one week, and then follow up again, and then I get a response. And for me, it wasn't that my account rep wasn't doing anything. Typically, they would see my first email, either asking about something or raising a concern. They would go and reach out to the internal Tesla team to get an answer. Um, but then they would fall short of communicating that to me. And this happened on numerous occasions for a few different things. So they were straightening out whatever the problem was. They just weren't communicating it. And as far as I can tell, I don't want to just blame, my singular representative. It seems like this is more of a blanket problem from other YouTube videos I've seen, as well as talking to other people that work at Tesla. It does seem like there's a problem here. They're aware of it. To me, reading between the lines, it really seemed like potentially these people weren't being in a weren't in a position to succeed. My intuition was that they were probably way overworked, and their workload was probably way too high, meaning that they just weren't able to take people's phone calls and provide the service that was needed. So that said, one thing I did learn, and for me it was I learned this way too late in the process, is that there's a generic call center you can call that will give you the next available Tesla Solar representative. And I had much better luck calling this number. So firstly, I think almost always, maybe with the exception of once, somebody picked up the phone. And as far as the service that I received, it seemed to be on par or even better than my designated account rep. So if I were to do this again, I would not even attempt to send all emails and questions through a single representative. Um, I would probably start with making the phone call to the call center to see if you can get an answer. Obviously, it's always good to keep things in emails too, but that's something that I would definitely do different this time around. Number two, let's talk about the Tesla crew. So, in contrast to my experience with the account representative, that was ultimately the most frustrating and slow and tedious. The crew and everyone that came to on site to my property was just fantastic. Everybody was super nice and knowledgeable. They always made time to address my questions and concerns. And it was also clear that they were really proud of the work that they were doing and the product that they were selling. So I have nothing but good things to say about the crews and the guys on the ground doing the work and installing the product. It was a really wonderful experience. Next, let's talk about site prep. So, for me, this is something that I hadn't given much forethought to until a couple days prior to installation, when suddenly a lot of material was showing up to my house. So, you can expect that there will be a dumpster delivered, as well as a porta potty, and then in addition, about 5 to 10 pallets of materials will be offloaded, waiting for the install crew when they get there. Now, for me, I live on a quiet, dead end street. I have a pretty big driveway. And so I was able to accommodate all the materials just fine. But I realize that may not be the case for everyone. And so if that's not the case, you might want to think ahead, sort of logistically about where all that material is going to go. How are you going to be able to get into and out of your house during the project? Gutters. So this is something, unfortunately, I learned the hard way. So for me, I had elected to remove my existing roof prior to installing the solar roof. And the messaging from Tesla was that if doing so, you'd also have to remove your gutters. Now, this wasn't a big problem because, like my roof that was 25 years old, so were the gutters. And honestly, regardless of what Tesla was telling me, they probably needed to be replaced. But something for you to be aware of is that Tesla had communicated that I had to take off my gutters. But really, I don't think that's quite the case. So when the demo crew came, the first thing they did was remove the entire existing asphalt roof. And then they had asked me before they left, do we need to remove the gutters before we go? And I had said yes. Tesla wants them removed. I think Tesla had anticipated that the demo crew needed them removed, and so they had advised you need to take them off. But clearly, the demo crew first they removed the roof, and then they did the gutters. So that wasn't a requirement for them. And then once the installation crew showed up, they had made a comment that they'd seen my gutters were gone and that I didn't actually need to remove them. So if your gutters are in good shape, realize that contrary to what Tesla might tell you, seems like you might not actually need to replace them. Now that said, what I can say is if you do elect to remove them, you should definitely have a plan to get the new gutters up immediately after install because Tesla does not do it. Now, I knew this going into the project that I was going to take them off, and I knew that Tesla was not going to put them up. But what I didn't realize was how badly I would need them. So, just a couple days after the installation completed, we got a pretty bad rainstorm. Torrential rains. We probably got a couple inches of rain in a short amount of time. And I didn't realize just how fast the new solar roof was going to shed the water. So, we took some video that I'll show here of water just completely jettisoning off the house.
What is that doing?
And then furthermore, it started collecting and pooling all around the house in places it never typically did because our gutters were gone. And so that left my wife and I to scramble and run to the local hardware store and buy a bunch of tarps and try to rig things up just to prevent water from coming into the house in our basement. So naively, I thought, "Hey, maybe I don't need the gutters." And then very quickly, I was proven completely wrong. And we need the gutters. And then we were in a tough position because we had the new roof, we didn't have gutters, and now we needed to very quickly try to find a vendor and get quotes and have someone try to get it installed as soon as possible. Which for us, it's we're now 3 or 4 weeks after install. We still don't have gutters. We're still dealing with water and trying to keep it away from the house. So I don't fault Tesla on this one. I think this one is largely my fault. I didn't anticipate very well. Maybe Tesla could have communicated, trying to get a plan set up, try to coordinate people ahead of time if you are electing to remove your gutters. So that would be my advice to you, which is if you are going to get new gutters. So one, the install crew recommended getting a 6-inch gutter, which I think is typically the widest gutter they make. And again, that's to accommodate for the water shutting off the roof at a faster speed. Honestly, I do wonder, even if we had left my gutters on, would they be able to catch the water coming off of the new roof? It's not quite clear if the new roof, if the overhang would have worked with the existing gutters. So even if technically you don't require new gutters, I think there is a risk that your existing gutters may not work as well as they used to with the new roof. So if I could do it again, I guess I do recommend removing the gutter, buying the bigger gutter, and then trying to coordinate that ahead of time, and tell that provider, that vendor, that you have an install window and that you want them to try to come as soon as possible after that point. I think that's your best chance of not encountering the same problems that we did. All right, next up, let's talk about the Powerwall location. So for me, this is another topic that I went back and forth with my Tesla account rep for probably 3 or 4 weeks leading up to installation. That wasn't the best time spent. So I had communicated with my Tesla account rep that I had a preference for where the Powerwalls might go. So there's an area in my basement. There's a small alcove that has 3 concrete walls that I thought might serve really well to put my 2 Powerwalls in. And so I had taken pictures and measurements and sent them to the account rep, who then forwarded them to the engineering team, only for them to get back to them and say, no, they can't go there. And so I said, okay, thanks for trying. But like I said, it took that conversation, that thread, it took at least 3 weeks, if not 4, to get a resolution. And so fast forward to installation day. And at my house, I had 2 leads. One was the solar roof lead, and one was the Powerwall lead. And so I sort of proactively gone out and sought him out because I wanted to have a conversation about my existing design, which had the Powerwalls being installed on an exterior wall on the complete opposite side of the house as the rest of the system. And so I didn't like the idea of having to run some conduit either around the house or through the house. And so we had a conversation for about 20 or 30 minutes. We walked all around my property. And I showed him my basement, and ultimately, he thought, my initial idea was the best, which was to install them in my basement in this little alcove, with the caveat being they'd have to put up a fireproof enclosure around it. And I was happy to do that, even if it meant extra cost. And so I guess my advice to someone going through this process is just realize that not everything's in stone. It does seem like Tesla grants their engineers and employees to make decisions, and for me it definitely resulted in a much better customer experience. I know Tesla tries to install the Powerwalls indoors to protect them from the elements. And especially here in New England, it means that they won't be exposed to as much cold weather, which means the performance will be slightly better. So I do know they try to do that. And in this case, ultimately, they were able to. So that was one thing I didn't quite realize ahead of time. I had hoped that would be the case. And to Tesla's credit, it was. And I'm very happy with ultimately where the Powerwalls ended up. Next up, construction noise. So if you're like me and you work from home, What kind of impact can you expect? Is it even possible to work from home during installation? Um, so my answer is yes, it is, with the exception of demo day. So for me, like I said, I elected to have my existing roof removed, and that was a 1 day demo where they came. They threw a giant tarp on the house, and they removed all the existing shingles and gutters. And at my house, it's a single floor ranch, and it was really, really loud. So I would say, with the exception of demo day, it's certainly possible to work from home. During demo day, my advice would be just get out of the house. Me and my wife were home, working from home that day, and if I could do it again, I would have just taken the day off and gone somewhere to be out of the house. It was really, really loud, really disruptive, practically impossible to work and take meetings. As far as the rest of the install process, so after demo was done, the actual noise level wasn't bad at all. With the exception of when they were working directly over me, I was able to work from home really with no problems at all. Occasionally, I'd have to put the mic on mute if there's some hammering, like I said, directly over me. But otherwise, it's definitely possible to stay home, not be impacted too badly. So something I did during the installation process was I made a habit of checking in with the team a couple times a day. So typically around mid morning or lunchtime, I would check in. And also when they were cleaning up right before they left, I would check in just to see if there were any hiccups or unexpected problems that were encountered. And by doing this, even though it wasn't in my nature to really want to do that, by being proactive about it, I was able to hear problems that came up pretty much as soon as they happened, and I was able to weigh in and provide my input or preference on the solution, and also which allowed the Tesla team to have time to actually execute on it. So I think if I hadn't done that, if I had just waited and been a little more retroactive about things, I'm not so sure that some of those issues would have been raised to me. It's possible the crew would have just, come up with whatever solution that they wanted, and gone ahead and run forward with it, and probably leaving you stuck at the end of the install with maybe something you didn't quite want or didn't quite know was going to happen. So a couple of examples of this were for me regarding where the wiring conduit was going to run from, the wires that come down from the roof that ultimately run and feed into the power walls. So once I saw that they had started getting that ready, I asked quite a few questions about their plan for where that conduit was going to be placed, and one thing they didn't know is that we do have some work planned later on the interior of the house and maybe putting up some new windows on that wall. And so by me communicating to that before they did anything, they were able to run the conduit in a place that really, I was confident would not be problematic in the future. Another example that came up was, I think it was after maybe the fourth day of install. I was checking in at the end of it, at the end of the day, with the roof lead, and he mentioned that they were actually a little bit short on the number of PV tiles that they were able to squeeze into the roof. And so we had about a 10-minute conversation about what we could do to remediate it. And again, Tesla, I think, gives their crew some authority to make decisions and do things. And ultimately, we were able to actually find a different spot in my roof to place those PV tiles and sort of make up for the difference. And so again, if I hadn't been checking in sort of as frequently as I was, I'm not sure what would have happened. It's certainly possible that at the end of the install, the crew would have said, "Hey, by the way, we were 5 or 10% short on the number of PV tiles, and that that's the best we could do." But by being proactive, again, to the crew's credit, they communicated the issue clearly, and they were very transparent about it. And then we were able to work together towards a solution that I think we were both happy with. One of the things that I was very pleasantly surprised about is that Tesla actually has a person that they hire to perform audits of the work that's being done on the house. So for me, after the initial demo day, a Tesla auditor showed up to inspect the work that had been done. And so in this case, Tesla had outsourced the roof removal process. And then during that process, those guys also installed an underlayment. And so this person came out and they inspected all of that work. They checked the flashing and made sure that there were no issues prior to installation commencing in just a couple of days. And then again, after the install crew was done, the very next day, the same engineer showed up and he went through everything. He was up on the roof. He checked out the power walls. He ran system tests. So sort of ensuring that the quality was as expected. He also took any last questions, concerns from me. And actually, in my case, there was one area in particular that I had some questions and concerns about. It sort of there's a spot on the back of my house. There's a small threshold where there's a back door, and when standing on the roof, the solar shingles are actually right next to you, so you can really see them up close, which is different than typically when you're on ground level looking up at the roof. And in this case, since we were so close to it, I could see that there were quite a few cosmetic issues with the metalwork that was done, as well as with the tiles. And so I simply raised it to him and said, "Hey, I noticed this. Is there anything you can do?" And without much struggle at all, he checked it out and agreed that it was a problem, and actually put in a work order for them to come back and just rework those few pieces that weren't quite right. So I think for me, if I had known this ahead of time, it would have provided a little bit of peace of mind. And also I would have been confident that, if there were any last lingering concerns or questions, uh, I would know that there'd be a time and place to have those addressed. So prior to installation, my expectation was that after installation, but before PTO, permission to turn on, my system would be deactivated. And again, I was happily surprised that Tesla was actually able to turn the system on. So the roof is on; it's collecting energy and storing it in my power walls. The only thing I can't do before PTO is export that energy back to the grid. But nonetheless, I'm able to generate today, even during these bleak winter months, about 40 or 50% of the energy needs of my home. Tesla did tell me that the system is currently throttled to just to, I think, make doubly sure that I don't have excess energy that needs to go somewhere. But even still, I was really happy that after paying all that money, I'm not just stuck waiting and not collecting energy in the time while I wait for the utility to come and give permission to turn on. Number 10, lastly, I just want to talk about the fact that I didn't quite realize how complementary the power walls were to the solar until after they were installed. So for me, my wife and I were a little bit on the fence about getting the power walls, and ultimately we decided to because we have some extensive sump pumps in our basement, and during periods of heavy rain, if we were to lose power, it typically stresses us out, and we're never quite sure what's going to happen. So for us, we primarily bought them for peace of mind. But having had the system up and running for a few weeks, um, I didn't anticipate just how complementary everything was. So during the day, when the sun is at its highest, the roof collects more energy than we can consume, and so it makes so much sense to store that and sort of locally on site at the house, and then later in the day pull from the battery. And the house does pull from the battery; it's very seamless and instantaneous. You don't even know inside the home. And so after the fact, it sort of became more obvious to me just how nice those two products work together. All right. Well, I guess that's it. So those are the 10 things that I learned on this journey of getting my Tesla solar roof installed. I hope they are able to help you in your Tesla solar journey as well. Thanks.